The next few poses will be done in a standing position. Please move slowly and at your own pace. Keep the sturdy chair nearby for balance if needed. If you find that I'm talking faster than you are moving, please take your time and do fewer repetitions. Take a nice deep inhale and exhale. Place the feet about hips width apart and grounded on the floor. Lift the toes and spread them nice and wide and feel the navel pull gently in towards the spine. Push the toes into the floor and lean forward just a little bit. Feel the muscles that keep you steady. Lean back just a little bit and feel the toes come up. Feel the muscles that keep you steady in this position. Now push all four corners of the feet into the floor. Notice the steadiness of mountain pose. Notice how the steadiness of mountain pose feels. On the next inhale, roll the shoulders towards the ears, back and down so the shoulders are slightly open. Let the palms rest open to the side. Inhale and let the arms rise with the palms facing up. Exhale, bend at the elbows and allow the hands to come down the center line. Sink into the knees just a little. Repeat this again. Inhale, lift the arms with the palms facing up. Allow the hands and face to be relaxed. Continue with this movement at your own pace. Breathe as you move and try to coordinate the breath with the movement. On the next breath, lift the arms back over the head. Fingertips point in, palms face up. Imagine that you have candles in the palms of your hands and you do not want to spill them. Turn the fingertips so they face behind you. The palms remain up. Turn the fingertips to the side and then to the front like an offering, then out to the side walls. Breathe as you move, up to the top with the fingers facing in again, towards one another, and then forwards like an offering, then out to the side walls. Breathe as you move, up to the top with the fingers facing in again. Let's do this rotation one more time. After the second rotation, allow the hands to cascade down by the side and let them rest. Pause for one slow inhale and exhale. One more breath. Inhale, exhale. This next exercise is excellent for strengthening the spine and gently stretching the muscles of the back, front, and sides. Attempt to make the movement easeful and gentle. We will do these movements with various arm positions. The first arm position is the easiest. Please be sure to stay with the one that feels best for your body. We will demonstrate them all. Take the right hand to the waist, and then the left. Roll the shoulders open. And on the exhale, lean to the right. Inhale to the center. On the exhale, lean to the left. Inhale back to the center. Roll the shoulders up, back, and down. And on the next inhale, gently pull the navel towards the spine. Pull the shoulder blades softly together. Get a small lift in the chin and feel a sense of lengthening through the front of the body. On the next exhale, begin to fold gently forward. It does not have to be all the way. Bend the knees slightly. Inhale and rise back to a standing position. Open the left arm to the side. Keep the elbow bent. Leave the right hand on the waist. Inhale. Exhale, lean slightly to the right, and then return back to the center. Bring the left hand down to the waist. Lift the right arm. Inhale. Exhale and lengthen to the left. Return to the center. Roll the shoulders open. Gently pull the navel in towards the spine. Pull the shoulder blades softly together. Get a small lift in the chin. Exhale and fold forward halfway. Inhale back to standing. Open the left arm again. Inhale, and on the exhale, lean to the right. Inhale and return back to the center. Place the left hand on the waist. Lift the right arm. Inhale. On the exhale, lean to the left. Inhale and return back to the center. Roll the shoulders open. Lengthen through the front of the body. Slightly pull the shoulder blades together. Get a small lift in the chin. Exhale and fold forward. Knees slightly bent. Inhale and return to standing in mountain pose. Pause for a moment. Inhale and exhale. For this warrior sequence, attempt to keep the movements gentle and relaxed. If you notice that you are struggling, move the feet closer together. Lower the arms or make the movements smaller. This pose is great for strengthening the legs, respiration, and opening the shoulders. Step the left foot forward just a few feet. The back foot points in at a 45-degree angle. The front knee bends and the hips face front if possible. Inhale, open the arms and bend at the elbows. On the exhale, bring the hands and elbows towards each other. Inhale, open the arms and push the heart softly forwards. Relax the shoulders. Exhale, bring the arms together. Inhale, open the arms to where you feel comfortable. Exhale, relax the arms inwards. Inhale, open and expand. Exhale, contract. Inhale, exhale. Bring the hands back down by the side, return to mountain pose. One breath here. Inhale, exhale. Step the right foot forward. Take a moment, there's no rush. Ground the back foot into the floor. Bend the front knee. When you are ready, open the arms. Inhale. Exhale, bring the hands and elbows towards one another. Inhale, open the arms. This is a relaxed opening in the chest. Exhale, bring the hands and arms towards one another. Inhale, repeat again, creating spaciousness with a full inhale. Exhale, contract and relax the arms slightly. 2 more times at your own pace. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. Let the hands rest down by the side and return back to mountain pose. Pause here for a few breaths.
Welcome back to the 50th online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peace Point with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, live streaming from our meditation center in London. Last time you saw me, we looked at blessing number 8 on mastering your craft. With the Dhamma talk today, we will continue our series on enlightened living with blessing number 9, artfulness in usage, or perhaps put more simply, self-discipline. So today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes, starting with a 25-minute talk to define self-discipline and look at how Buddhist householders are supposed to keep the precepts. Then 25 minutes of meditation and 20 minutes to explain monastic approaches to self-discipline. I should point out from the start that this blessing of the Enlightened Living series is almost identical to the 4th lecture of the Buddhist Concept series, which I've already given as B005, Avoiding Unwholesomeness. But as today's lecture is supposed to delve deeper into the Buddhist roots of knowledge, although there is some overlap of content, today I've added in more detail concerning definitions, scriptural examples, and the monastic side of self-discipline. So to revise the last few sessions, the 7th blessing concerning artfulness in knowledge, with the message that we should be curious to seek any new knowledge, either in spiritual or worldly ways, as long as it doesn't have any negative implications for the human dignity of ourselves, others, or society in general. Once you can avail yourself of such knowledge, then it is a blessing in itself. Building on that, the 8th blessing last time concerned artfulness in the application of knowledge or mastering one's craft. The message there was that we should be enthusiastic to apply any new skills in spiritual or worldly ways, as long as they don't have any negative implications for the human dignity of ourselves, others, or society in general. Once you can avail yourself of such skills, then it is also a blessing in itself. But since at this stage we are already equipped with the knowledge and its application, the additional skill we need to master is the awareness of the ethical implications of our actions towards the human dignity of ourselves, others, or society in general. The purpose of blessing number 9 is to give us the guidelines we need to allow us to judge our own behavior in word and deed, so that the way we use our intellectual resources and craftsmanship brings no detriment to society around us or to our spiritual furtherment. Without self-discipline, even a person of knowledge and experience can come to an unfortunate end if they lack self-discipline. Mastery of self-discipline prevents us feeling tempted to apply our knowledge in an unscrupulous way, to save our knowledge and skills from becoming like a sword without a scabbard or a firearm without a safety. In our consideration of the value of artfulness in usage towards human dignity, we must always consider 3 levels of description: our own personal human dignity, the human dignity of others, and the dignity of the whole economic system in society. Having self-discipline has benefits on all 3 levels. Firstly, on the personal level, having self-discipline protects our health from self-induced illness, reducing possible obstacles in our spiritual vocation, especially those arising from unintentional blunders with the defilements of action or kamma-kilesa, and allowing us to develop our level of virtue from mere discipline or vinaya to self-discipline or sila, which is the foundation for the subsequent development of meditation or samadhi and wisdom or panya. It said that having self-discipline is one of the major differences between humans and savages. Therefore, by preserving our level of discipline, we protect ourselves from decline into savagery. Secondly, on the interpersonal level, having self-discipline stops people taking advantage of each other. Lastly, on the social level, having self-discipline promotes compliance with the law and general harmony for society. Of course, it's an advantage to know all the theory about self-discipline and how to acquire it. but it's not until you actually become a person with self-discipline that you will really start to gain the benefits from this blessing. From person to person, the intellectual resources and the level of craftsmanship may not be the same. However, even more important than the knowledge and skills a person has is the potential damage they can do to themselves, others, and society if they have no ethical discretion about how to use that knowledge and skill. This is why it's vitally important that everyone has virtue to go hand in hand with their knowledge, specifically the virtue to know the negative implications of any deeds that they may do or the words that they may say. In society in general, we tend to think that if what we do or say is not illegal, then it's acceptable to our human dignity. However, the law is really only a very rough and ready guideline for what should or should not be done in society. To give a dramatic example, a person can get away with murder if they have no witnesses and leave no forensic evidence. Furthermore, if the law from country to country differs, does this also mean that the ethics can also be localized? In some countries, the law may be used to suppress freedom of expression, so the law alone doesn't give us sufficient guidelines for the preservation of human dignity at any of the levels of description. This is why more detailed guidelines were provided by the Buddha in the form of a checklist of 4 criteria for ethical behavior. The first and most important criterion for something being ethical is whether it compromises the 5 precepts, which you could refer to as a minimum baseline for humane behavior. In other words, does the action or speech contradict the 5 precepts? And we will come back to these in just a moment. This form of discipline is spiritual discipline concerning our quality of mind and the quality of mind of those who share society with us. We find that these 5 precepts are at the heart of codes of discipline of many different religions, whether it be the Christian 10 Commandments, the Night Journey verses of the Quran, or the 5 yamas of the Hindu conduct. The second criteria, not prohibitions, but a set of positive observances, is that any ethical behavior should conform with the 5 virtues or pancha dhamma, which comprise compassion, right livelihood, contentment with one's lawfully wedded, truthfulness, and awareness. This form of discipline is spiritual duties concerning the quality of mind of ourselves and those around us in society. The third criteria, on peril of becoming an outlaw, is that our behaviors should not conflict with local law. This form of discipline is worldly or material discipline, and it concerns our quality of life and the quality of life of those who share society with us. And lastly, some customs on a local level serve to bring people together. Our chosen speech and actions would ideally align with local customs in order to fit in with our neighbors. Again, this form of discipline is worldly or material and concerns social harmony and solidarity. If a proposed behavior, such as smoking cannabis, breaks the 5 precepts, even if it doesn't break the local law, it should be avoided. In the same way, even if something is not required by law, but is a local custom, for example, providing candies to children who come trick-or-treating on Halloween, perhaps this is a good reason to comply, at least for harmony on the local level. The proviso is, of course, that the custom should not compromise the 5 precepts. The root of the Pali word for artfulness in usage or discipline is vinaya, which comes from 2 stems, vi and nai, where nai means something that leads you and vi means any of 3 things. It can mean good or illuminated or different. The 2 particles together give us the literal definition of the word vinaya as leading you to good or leading you to enlightenment or leading you to something different. Leading one to goodness means that it takes you away from unwholesomeness. Leading one to enlightenment means that it allows us to see a person as they really are. Leading one to be different means that it raises one above savagery. In practice, the word vinaya is usually taken to mean rules or regulations to restrain ourselves in word and deed to avoid causing suffering to ourselves or others. It may seem curious that Vinaya doesn't restrain the mind directly, but indirectly it purifies the mind because it selects preferentially for wholesome actions in word and deed that originate in the mind. When we can avoid causing suffering to ourselves or others, we set ourselves on the path to goodness, enlightenment, and difference from base conduct in society. Vinaya will be the virtue that tells us what is appropriate or inappropriate to do or say, look at or eat. When people think of precepts, they often mistakenly think that precepts are nothing more than prohibitions. In fact, the meaning of the Pali word for precepts, in the original language at least, in other words, the word sila, literally means the norm or cooling. Precepts mean the level of virtue that is normal for human beings to have. It's a norm that distinguishes men from savages or from nature red in tooth and claw. It is for this reason that we differentiate Vinaya from Sila by calling the latter self-discipline. As we shall see, self-discipline is the result of training yourself in discipline. It's a state of mind rather than a set of rules to follow. Discipline is a means by which we restrain the manifesting of unwholesome deeds and speech. When we are newcomers to discipline, the mind is usually still rather reluctant. Many protesting thoughts will go through our mind in response to the inconvenience of behaving in a disciplined way. Such thoughts do not constitute a breach of discipline because they are not manifest. However, conforming with those rules, even reluctantly, will protect a person from slipping into any of the 4 defilements of action or gamagilesa, and in turn, this minimal discipline will gradually channel the mind into development of self-discipline. Self-discipline would mean that the person's thought will align with the wholesomeness of their actions and speech. At this point, the reluctance in the mind will have been overcome, indicating that one has started to be a teacher to oneself sufficiently well to be able to police one's body, speech, and mind without the need of any further rules or regulations to force such behaviors. In a technical sense, this mature form of self-discipline originates directly from our conscience, would be referred to as Arya Sila or the perfection of Sila, topics which we'll come back to in more detail a little later on. Having rules to stop you from doing certain things, of course, helps a person to become more aware of those behaviors and, by extension, more aware of themselves. They function according to what the 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard referred to as the principle of limitation, which means that the more a person limits themselves, the more resourceful they become. Obviously, the more rules you follow, even if they were arbitrary, the more aware you would become. However, Buddhist precepts are not arbitrary. They have a rationale behind their content. At the most basic level, for householders at least, the precepts are designed to prevent people exploiting the weaknesses of others or to streamline the mind for meditation retreats. On a monastic level, the precepts are designed to protect the reputation of the monastic community. Accordingly, there are different sets of codes of conduct which can be used for training in discipline. Some are suitable for lay people, others are suitable for monks, but at root, all the sets of precepts help to protect the human dignity of ourselves, others, and society. But it's true that the more intensive the level of practice, the more rules of training we tend to keep. But before we look at the precepts themselves, let's backtrack slightly to look at the rationale behind the precepts, which means the ideal we are aiming for when keeping the precepts, so that when we look at the precepts themselves, we can see how they pragmatize or operationalize particular forms of abstinence to bring those ideals closer within reach. If a Buddhist wants to avoid picking up negative karma, ideally they should aim to abstain completely from accumulating any more unwholesomeness, such as in verse 124 of the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "Never does evil befall one who does not do it." This is why, before going into the practicality of avoiding unwholesome ethical choices, is useful to understand the ideal of a mind free from unwholesomeness. The Tenfold Path of Wholesomeness, or Kusala Gammapatha, outlines a set of 10 ideals to be aimed for. The last 3 items on the list are actually qualities of mind. These 10 ideals comprise absolute avoidance of killing, stealing, adultery, telling lies, engaging in malicious gossip, speaking harshly, chattering idly, intending to take the possessions of others, vengeful intentions, and wrong view. Since such ideals are hard to achieve, especially when most of us do not even know our own minds well enough to keep up with our defilements in the mind of greed, vengeance, or false views. Others have the intention to say things without upsetting anyone, but when they come to speak, the wrong words slip out. Others are barely able to resist the temptations threatening to destroy their marriage. Thus, a more pragmatic strategy is needed to put these ideals into practice, especially to train our intentions to become more wholesome. 3 strategies for avoidance of unwholesomeness, or as they are known in Pali, virati, are generally described in Buddhism. Firstly, avoidance on the spur of the moment, or sampata virati. It relies on the person having a clear and accurate sense of conscience, which at this point in the blessings is probably not fully developed. So it leaves the person vulnerable to making ethical miscalculations. The second is avoidance of unwholesomeness based on taking the precepts, or samatthana virati. It is a form of discipline whereby one refrains from unwholesome actions or speech for fear of breaking precepts previously requested from a monk. This is a strategy for avoidance we will be mostly interested in today. Lastly, there exists a way of avoiding unwholesomeness through transcending, or samucceta virati, which is a form of self-discipline whereby a person whose mind has become very pure as a result of a meditational attainment is no longer tempted to do anything unwholesome. This is absolute avoidance of evil on the type achieved by those who have attained the stage of Buddhist sainthood. Since at this stage in the blessings we are too cautious to rely on spur-of-the-moment ethical decisions, and we're not yet enlightened enough to rely on transcendence, for blessing number 9, we are mostly interested in pragmatizing our self-discipline by adopting a set of precepts at the level appropriate to our ability and status. So let's start by looking at the most basic set of precepts advocated for every Buddhist, which is called the 5 precepts, or Panchasila. The 5 precepts are much older than Buddhism, but were adopted by Buddhism along with many other religions as the core practice for moral conduct. Elements of the same prohibitions, as I mentioned earlier, are to be found in the ethical rules of other religions too. It's because, irrespective of belief system, the 5 precepts protect it against a person taking advantage of the weaknesses of themselves or others, since there's nothing that leaves a person more vulnerable than robbing them of their life, their possessions, their spouse, or their trust. There's nothing that disables a person more than the loss of their capacity to understand or retain information long enough to ethically weigh up a decision. These 5 weaknesses in human relationships are protected by the 5 precepts. 5 precepts address universal aspects of morality. 5 precepts themselves consist of 5 rules of training to refrain from killing living beings, from stealing, from committing adultery, from telling lies, and from knowingly drinking alcohol or consuming intoxicants that lead to heedlessness. By keeping the 5 precepts, people indirectly ensure the harmony of society and also prevent many of the roots of suffering. The precepts bring a sense of ease to the mind and body because there is no sense of guilt and regret left in the mind, not to speak of its stressful physical byproducts. Just for disambiguation purposes, I should point out that the 5 precepts share the same Pali word, Panchasila, as the 5 principles upon which Sukarno founded the Indonesian constitution, but Indonesian law is actually founded on 5 completely different principles. 5 precepts are designed to be kept by Buddhist householders on a daily basis as a way to succeed in planned avoidance of unwholesomeness. In an attempt to make such guidelines easy to understand, they were always enumerated as rules of training or sikkhapada, by which one's conscience is treated as a work in progress, where you are constantly improving yourself rather than commandments intended to produce guilt or about sin or attract punishment. The Buddha was not even the originator of the 5 precepts because they are thought to predate Buddhism, like a defining blueprint for humanity itself. By avoiding unwholesomeness of exploiting weaknesses in themselves or others, those who practice the 5 precepts are able to evade the associated suffering and pain that will come back as a result of the karmic boomerang. There are some contemporary Buddhist traditions, like that of Thich Nhat Hanh's 5 mindfulness trainings, that have missed the point slightly and elaborated the 5 precepts into ideals. But this form of moral escalation actually makes it much harder for the person keeping the precepts to actually know if they have succeeded or not. To keep things clear, in early Buddhism, ideals were kept separate from precepts to help Buddhists train themselves to actually keep the precepts in a way that they can be confident about, especially about the integrity of their self-discipline. To this end, each precept was defined in terms of the components necessary to cause the precept to be broken. To take the first precept of not killing as an example, there are 5 components. Firstly, the victim must start out alive. Secondly, the perpetrator must be aware the victim is alive. Thirdly, the perpetrator must have the intention to kill the victim. Fourthly, the perpetrator must exert effort towards killing the victim. Fifth and lastly, the victim must die as intended. All 5 of the components must be triggered for the precept to be counted as broken. Therefore, if some wild animal runs out into the road and you run it over in your car because you don't have the intention to do so, then that wouldn't be counted as breaking the precepts. With the other 4 of the 5 precepts, the components of each precept reflect the investment of intention, effort, and fulfillment and awareness of what is happening. Of course, the operant action for each precept will differ. Removing an object from its owner's possession for the second precept, sexual intercourse with someone else's partner for the third precept, misrepresentation of the truth for the fourth precept, and consumption of an intoxicating drink, non-medicinal drug, or tobacco product for the fifth precept. For all these precept components, if in any situation not all components have been breached, although the behavior may incur bad karma, the precept is still not regarded as having been broken. This is not to say that unwholesomeness does not arise in the mind in proportion to the number of components breached. The idea of keeping the precepts is eventually that they will become internalized or second nature in a way that makes them transferable, even to situations not explicitly mentioned in the precepts themselves. The precepts thus become a force to bind people together in society with trust and integrity. If a Buddhist has intended to keep the precepts but fails to do so, then they simply renew their precepts by saying the Pali formula Pāṇātipāta, Veramani, and so on to themselves, or repeat it after a monk, next time trying harder to keep their precepts intact until they can succeed. Beyond the 5 precepts, there are several other elaborations of self-discipline that have more ambitious objectives, namely 8 precepts and the monastic precepts that I will come back to after our meditation. To elaborate first of all on the 8 precepts, these are a set of rules of training which expand on the 5 precepts with adjustment of the 3rd and 5th precepts and addition of a 6th, 7th, and 8th. The precepts themselves consist of 8 rules of training. Firstly, not to kill living beings. Secondly, not to steal. Thirdly, not to be uncelibate. Fourthly, not to tell lies. Fifthly, not to drink alcohol or consume intoxicants. Sixthly, not to take meals between midday and dawn. 7th, not to indulge in romantic entertainment or immodesty. Eighth and last, not to be indulgent in one's sleeping habits. The 8 precepts are intended to be kept by Buddhist householders during the times of intensified training, especially on meditation retreats or for self-purification on a periodic basis, such as once or twice a week. 8 precepts are sometimes called Uposatha Sila. The only real difference between 8 precepts and Uposatha Sila is the length of time a Buddhist is expected to keep them. The content is the same, but usually for Uposatha Sila, a Buddhist will only keep them on the quarter moon days, with the possibility of 1 day before for preparation and 1 day after for debriefing. For the 8 precepts, the length of time is flexible. As it happens today, we have 2 stories with a sort of creature called a naga. And just before you give me a hard time for having you believe in imaginary pre-scientific Buddhist life forms, I just post an oarfish photo for you to mull over the limits of our knowledge concerning the extent of strange waterborne species on our planet. In any case, if you remember back to my discourse on Buddhist cosmology and the 31 realms, which you can find at B063, you will already know that nagas are a sort of very large serpents, which have the ability to shapeshift into human form. They belong to the first level of heaven, and in the form of a serpent, they are huge in size and extremely dangerous. But when they take human form, they are able to mingle with regular human beings, although they have to restrain their dangerous powers to do so. If they are not in the human realm, nagas tend to have their own dimension at the bottom of rivers or lakes. So the story I'm going to share today was one which the Buddha told to give encouragement to a group of lay followers who were strict in keeping the 8 precepts or Uposatha Sila on the full moon days. The reason he told the story was that he wanted to show that in a previous existence, he too has strictly observed the 8 precepts on the full moon days, even without the encouragement of a teacher, although he had to make great sacrifices to do so. So here comes the story, as it is told in the Buddhadatta Jataka, or the 543rd birth story of the Buddha. At that time, the Bodhisattva, or the Buddha-to-be, was born as a prince called Buddhadatta to a regular human father and a Naga mother. He and his father regularly went to discuss matters of importance with the king of the gods who lived in the second level of heaven. These meetings made the Bodhisattva long for the splendor of heaven and began faithfully to uphold all the 8 precepts of the Uposatha Sila on the full moon days to ensure rebirth there. Initially, he did this in an empty palace in the Naga realm, but he kept getting interrupted. So he started to observe the 8 precepts in the human realm because nobody would bother him there, even though as a Naga, this made him rather vulnerable. He wound his body around a termite mound throughout the night, and in the morning 10 beautiful maidens would come to bedeck him with perfumes and flowers and accompany him back to the Naga realm while playing music. One day, as he was keeping Uposatha Sila in this way, he was captured without a fight by a cruel and greedy snake charmer. Because although Buddhadatta knew he was in danger, he didn't want to obstruct his road to heaven and refused to use his Naga powers to defend himself or flee to safety. The snake charmer was thrilled to capture a Naga and put him under a serpent spell, seized Buddhadatta by the tail, drugged him, stretched him out to full length on the ground and crushed all his bones into pieces to rob him of his powers. Although Buddhadatta suffered great pain, he still allowed himself to feel no anger. The snake charmer stuffed Buddhadatta into a basket and headed to a village to do a show. When a crowd gathered round, he ordered Buddhadatta to dance, change his shape, size and color, make himself invisible, and breathe flame and smoke. Hoping he would eventually be released if the snake charmer made a lot of money, Buddhadatta did everything he was asked. And the crowd went wild, giving gold, garments, and treasure to the value of 100,000 gahapanas to the snake charmer. The snake charmer had originally planned to set the Naga free when he had earned 1,000 Gahapanas, but after the performance he got greedy and he knew he could make an even bigger fortune in the city. So he did shows in every town he passed through until he reached Benares, where he was asked to perform in front of the king. On the day Buddhadatta was seized, his mother dreamt a man had cut off her arm and carried it away with blood streaming. She knew the dream foretold misfortune in her family, and when Buddhadatta was late to return, she was sure something evil had befallen him. She grew increasingly despondent, and later, when her other 3 sons and Buddhadatta's family came to visit, they promised her that they would go out and rescue him. Later, to cut a long story and a very complicated story short, he was eventually freed by his family. When Buddhadatta reached old age, having faithfully kept the precepts his whole life, in spite of life-threatening dangers, upon death he earned the place in heaven he had worked so hard to achieve. So now that we know the importance of precepts for lay practitioners, before we go any further, let's take the opportunity to cultivate that inner wisdom by settling ourselves for 25 minutes of meditation, which today is entitled The Purpose of Meditation. If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself, you can follow my guidance. So to start off with, we allow our eyes to close very gently for meditation. Be careful that you have closed your eyes as lightly as possible, with your upper and lower eyelashes touching only very gently together. If you can get closing your eyes right, then the rest of the meditation will be easy. If you close your eyes gently, the muscles of your face will become soft, and all the rest of the muscles in your body will become relaxed in the same way. All the way down through your shoulders, arms, hands and fingers. You can continue by relaxing all the muscles in your trunk, both legs, down to your feet and your toes. All of this follows from closing your eyes in the correct way. So don't overlook the importance of this, even though you hear the same advice every time there's a guided meditation. So there's nothing holding you back from the attainment of inner peace within yourself. And we might reflect that our time in this world is fairly limited. Our life can come to an end without any warning at any moment. And if we hope to achieve success in our meditation within our own lifespan, and it's better to make sure we've understood the technique as well as possible, to be able to make some sort of breakthrough in our meditation in our remaining time. So that our meditation can be a refuge and leave us reassured, confident and relaxed. So we make sure that our state of mind is light and relaxed, putting aside any worries or concerns, anything superfluous to our practice. Any thoughts from the past or any plans for the future, remaining as far as possible in the present moment, with our mind on the task in hand. And at the same time, we conjure up a sense of happiness and joy in the mind, as if tiny particles of happiness and joy completely fill our body and mind. And if a sense of happiness and joy doesn't come naturally to mind, we might cast our mind back to a time in our lives when we felt truly happy, reconnecting with that feeling rather than the particular circumstances, and allowing that sensation to grow and spread within ourselves until we feel fully relaxed both in body and in mind. And from there we bring our attention gently to the center of our body. We give ourselves a feeling at the center of our body that there is a bright, clear sphere of light shining, as bright and clear as a diamond or a mirror, or like a drop of water, like a crystal ball inside us. And we keep our attention on this bright inner object as continuously as we can for as long as we can, lightly and gently. If you need to, you can make use of the sound of the mantra to keep your mind free of thought, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, for as long as it's useful to keep your attention on track, continuously at the center of the body. So you have two things in your mind in effect: the inner object and the sound of the mantra. And two things hand in hand will keep your mind free from distraction, because any distractions will only hinder our access to inner experience. Any obstacles will weigh us down in body and mind, causing our mind to feel blocked or unwieldy, narrow, claustrophobic, or unable to enlarge. So the only way to gain levity of both body and mind is to relocate our attention within the space of the body. And if you notice the teachings of the Buddha, where he advocated letting go of our attachments to everything, whether it be animate or inanimate objects, to let go of any grasping, because these fetters are of no benefit to us. They cause us to feel weighed down in body and in mind. They blot out the inner source of brightness. They may cause us to lead our lives unskillfully. So we might remind ourselves of this teaching on non-attachment, whether we start with ourselves and work our way gradually outwards, or we start on the outside and make our way gradually inwards. We can look at our own bodies, our hair, skin, teeth, fingernails, toenails, and the way they deteriorate, in spite of our best efforts with cosmetics. It means that they are of a nature to disintegrate. It applies to our bodies, our clothes, even the jewelry we wear is of the same nature, because they all have a limited lifespan. As we reflect from the inside out, to our furniture, our homes, all have limited lifespan. The cars we drive, our investments, land and assets are all temporary. Even our neighborhood, the roads that connect them, municipality, county, country, and even the globe and universe itself are eventually going to deteriorate. So we must let go of our attachment to any of these things. Pinning our happiness on any of these things is of no use to us. It imprisons the mind by hitching it to things that are without ultimate meaning. We can live out our whole lives without coming to an end of material attachments to worry about. If we think of those things which are external to ourselves, they just weigh us down both in body and in mind, and they blot out the inner source of brightness. They impede us from attaining inner experience or an inner refuge. If we reflect on these truths momentarily, each time before we meditate, and it only takes a minute, that all conditioned things are impermanent, even our own body, and of a nature to deteriorate, then we'll be able to let go more easily. If our mind lets go of attachment to the things outside ourselves, no matter whether they come to us via our eyes, ears, nose, taste buds or touch, any of the five senses, then our mind will return within the space of our body and come more easily to a standstill at the center of the body. If the mind comes to a standstill within, then inner illumination will arise. The opportunity for us to make the inner journey of the mind will dawn for us. Our mind will feel as if it's broken free of all forms of unwholesomeness and harm previously present in our lives. The mind will become increasingly subtle and refined. The deeper the mind reaches, the purer it will become. It will become so pure that we can see the purity of our own mind as a crystal sphere within us. And it's a purity that goes beyond a mere subjective feeling, but it will allow us to access a form of inner vision known as insight. An inner sphere that is the culmination of perception, memory, thought and cognition. Something that's more than just our imagination, but a real phenomenon which increases the whole sense of well-being within ourselves. So we continue to focus our mind gently at the center of our body, letting go of anything else that's not relevant to our practice. Lightly, gently and continuously, maintaining our mind with the inner object, whether it be something we see or something we feel, at the center of ourselves. Each to our own practice for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. Lightly, gently, continuously. Always at the center of whatever we see or feel within ourselves. And sometimes we have to be careful, not only of attachments to things in the outside world, or even the physical aspects of our own body and mind. We have to be careful even of attachment to progress in the meditation itself. Sometimes when our mind is becoming very still, when we have nothing new to keep the mind's interest, there's a temptation to try to see something more. Often it's because of an attachment to the idea of getting results in our meditation or of getting new experiences. And we justify our enthusiasm by thinking that it must lead our meditation in the correct direction. But really, this sort of enthusiasm is only really appropriate to get us to sit for meditation in the first place. But while we are actually sitting for meditation, we really just need to let the mind be. We need to stop grasping after any possibility of results or progress that we anticipate. Everyone wants to make a breakthrough in their meditation, but sometimes we can go about it in the wrong way. Therefore we have to stop by just letting the mind be. Even if there's nothing new for us to see, we must observe without interfering. It doesn't mean we're getting no benefit from the meditation, because every time we meditate we collect up happiness little by little, and the mind will gradually be purified and clarified, and our ability to meditate will gradually accumulate, just like termites bringing grains of sand until they've built a huge termite mound, or like watering a tree at its roots. The tree grows a little each day. We're never able to tell just how many inches it's grown in a day, but after some time it starts to bear fruit. Meditation is similar. All we need to do is close our eyes, relax our body, bring our mind softly to a standstill inside, without worrying about the results the meditation will yield. You shouldn't be discontented with yourself, thinking that inside ought to be brighter than it seems to be. We should just observe without interfering until the mind reaches a point of equilibrium, whereby it can be attracted towards enlightenment. Later, when we become more adept in recognizing and guiding our states of mind, we can bring the mind to that equilibrium intentionally. But at this stage in our meditation, we've not yet reached that point. We need to adjust our approach. It doesn't mean we're never going to reach the point of mastery, but for now, we need to remain mindful of all the advice we've heard on approaching our meditation. Otherwise, when we get to the good bits in our meditation, all the advice goes out of the window and we can't stop ourselves applying the wrong sort of effort. If in doubt, we just reset our efforts, make a new start, pretend we are new to meditation like a child or using our beginner's mind. In the meantime, we don't deny or resist whatever inner experiences arise in the meditation, We should just be content with whatever arises, being friendly to whatever comes up, even if it's darkness or even if it's nothing new. And for as long as we enjoy our experience of meditation, our inner experiences will sort themselves out. It will be a majestic transformation inside that no money could buy. A transformation that is beyond compare. An experience that comes together with subtle joy and happiness, and which inspires us to extend compassion towards all living beings without exception. So we train the mind to rest at a standstill in brightness and clarity at the center of ourselves. Whatever there is to observe on the inside, be it darkness, light, images or otherwise, we observe without interfering, continuously, without entertaining any thoughts in the mind. As a meditator, it's not our job to analyze what we see or to run a mental commentary. So we train ourselves in this way, both when meditating or even as we get up to do other things in our lives, whether standing, walking, sitting or lying down, whether eating, speaking or exercising, until having our mind at the center becomes second nature. We already have all the knowledge we need to succeed in meditation. Whoever you are, inner experience awaits you within. So it's not a question of whether the breakthrough will come for us, it's just a matter of time and consistency in our practice. We adapt our practice to continue alongside whatever life may throw at us, like a point of stillness in the eye of the storm, or an oasis in the desert, attracting abundance into our lives on all possible levels. So we continue to train our mind, train our attention lightly, gently and continuously at the center of ourselves for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the time for our loving kindness meditation. Continue to maintain our awareness at the center of the body the whole of the time, or is it the center of whatever inner experience we've built up for ourselves as a result of the meditation so far? If there's a sort of a brightness inside, it may be like diamond brightness sparkling at the center of yourself. Then allow that brightness to expand outwards. If it's more of a feeling of well-being, and touching your awareness very gently at the center of that feeling, it will spread slowly outwards. For others, there may be some sort of imagery inside. If you place your mind gently at the center of the imagery, it will also become larger in size, expanding outwards. Expanding outwards by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness. And at this point we share our loving kindness with all sentient beings around us. We share by extending that loving kindness outwards from the center of ourselves, initially to the whole of our own body, wishing ourselves to be well and happy, free from suffering, with the full force of forgiveness for ourselves. We extend the loving kindness to all those around us, extend that loving kindness outwards, beyond the peripheries of our own body, into the environment around us, taking in all the sentient beings in our midst, the room in which we are sitting for meditation, further outwards to the whole building, neighborhood, as far outwards as we can extend our loving kindness. Because as meditators we are like the sentinels of peace for the world. If we are able to conjure up peace in the form of brightness or well-being within ourselves, even a single meditator can bring wholesomeness and peace to the whole of our planet. With many meditators, you can imagine just how much more bright and beautiful our world could become if everyone in the world was able to reconnect with that inner light. So we extend the brightness or the well-being or the inner peace outwards, the whole building, the whole neighborhood, almost like an aura or a halo. And we're extending around us, taking in all the living beings therein, extending that inner peace to all of them, outwards to the whole city, whole county, whole country, the whole of the continent, to all the continents of the world, until our loving kindness extends across the whole of the face of this planet, with a sense of compassion and forgiveness for all, no matter who or what they may be, until the extent of our loving kindness feels infinite. It grows and expands wider across the face of our planet, the wish that everyone on earth could one day reconnect with inner light, while remaining mindful of the precious nature that all could have to also learn about the inner light of peace for their own benefit. We continue to maintain the sense of loving kindness radiating outwards from our center, and the bright diamond sparkle at the center of that, for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Sappa Buddhanupavena, Sappa Dhammanupavena, Sappa Sankhanupavena, Sattha Soti, Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gently finishing your practice. So to turn gently back to our subject matter for today, having dealt with the precepts of lay people before our meditation, we now turn to look at the precepts upheld by Buddhist monastics. We start by elaborating on the 10 precepts upheld by novice monastics and those who have taken a lower ordination or papaja. The 10 precepts are a set of rules of training which expand on the 8 precepts, with the splitting in 2 of the 7th precept and the addition of a 10th. That is, firstly, not to kill living beings, secondly, not to steal, thirdly, not to be uncelibate, fourthly, not to tell lies, fifthly, not to drink alcohol or consume intoxicants, sixthly, not to take meals between midday and dawn, seventh, not to indulge in romantic entertainment, eighth, not to indulge in immodesty, ninth, not to be indulgent in one's sleeping habits, 10th and last, not to handle gold or silver. These precepts are intended to be kept by Buddhist novices throughout the period of their ordination. Next, let's briefly describe the precepts of fully ordained monastics, those who have taken the ceremony of Upasambhata. Fully ordained monastics have a special discipline in keeping with their aim to become enlightened within the shortest possible time, while upholding the good name of the monastic community. For the fully ordained monks, the pathway to eradicate defilements of the mind is so intensive that the self-discipline of monastics is quite exhaustive, dealing with every aspect of their lives. Fully ordained monastic conduct is a set of rules of training which expands on the 10 precepts and is meant to be kept by monastics throughout their period of ordination. Many of the additional precepts are intended to ensure that monks help maintain harmony and the good reputation of the Buddhist monastic community in the eyes of the lay supporters. For now, monastic precepts, generally we are familiar with the number 227, but this figure only refers to the number of precepts in the Theravadin Code of Monastic Conduct, whereas the number may be 253 for the Mula Sarvastivada Code of Monastic Conduct, which refers to Vajrayana Buddhist monks, or 250 for the Dhamma Guptaka Code of Conduct for the Mahayana Buddhist monks. Where the monastic code is applied to nuns, the Theravada Code requires 311 precepts, and the Dharma Guptaka requires 364 rules. The number for Mula Sarvastivada Bhikkhunis is missing because historically the female monastic tradition did not reach as far as Tibet. The Buddha laid down the code of monastic conduct, or Patimokkha, with the idea that it may be used as a training for monks to uproot their defilements, to set a common standard of monastic behavior where a love of virtue is the norm, so that monks can have faith in their own conduct, to save monks from embarrassment when others with mind-reading abilities question their conduct, to save badly practicing monks from the unfortunate realms, and as a harbor from which monks could set sail towards nirvana. In the Vinaya and also in the Anguttara Nikaya, you can find 10 reasons for the Buddha laying down the code of conduct for monks: for the excellence and peace of the monastic community, to curb the behavior of stubborn and shameless disciples, while facilitating the happiness of the monastic community and of the monks who respect discipline. Monastic code of conduct was also meant to protect monks from defilements that might increase in the present time or in the future. To give an example, if monks are allowed to speak one-on-one with females, this may lead to more serious transgressions either in the near or distant future, such as monks getting used to spending all their time thinking about particular females. And in its role of protecting the reputation of the monastic community, the code of conduct was meant to instill faith in the public who are not yet faithful, while increasing the faith of the public who are already faithful. For the long term, the monastic code of conduct was meant to keep the teaching of the Buddha steadfast, while preserving the code of conduct for posterity. Although it would be possible to describe each of the 227 precepts, I don't think I have enough time to do that, so I will just describe the monastic precepts in terms of the categories of seriousness. The most serious are the rules entailing defeat, or parajika. These are 4 rules in In this category, killing people, stealing sexual intercourse, and falsely claiming mental attainments. Any monk who infringes the rules of this category would immediately be kicked out of the monkhood. Even if no one witnesses the monk's misdemeanor, he is effectively no longer considered a monk. The second most serious are offenses requiring an initial and subsequent meeting of the order, or Sanghadisesa. When a monk breaks any of these 13 rules, which cover things like dalliance with females or building luxurious personal accommodation, they must confess in front of a whole monastic assembly. Then the monk will be put on probation and stripped of his monastic seniority for a period of about 10 days, after which time, if he shows remorse, he can be readmitted to the monastic community. All the rest of the 227 rules are those entailing confession, and in the slide you can see that these lesser rules cover several subcategories, which include rules entailing confession, or Pachitiya, rules entailing forfeiture and confession, or Nisakya Pachitiya, rules entailing acknowledgement, or Patidesaniya, the minor transgressions, or Dukkata, and wrong speech, or Dupasita. By confessing to another monk, the offending monk can be returned to purity again. In fact, confession doesn't wash away the unwholesomeness caused by the infringement of the discipline, but it helps to give the monk the motivation not to infringe the same rule of conduct again. Confession is considered like the healing of an open wound where the karmic scar still remains. Best of all is never to break the rules of the monastic conduct in the first place. It's important to remember that self-discipline for monks means more than just following a long set of rules. In fact, there are 4 important components of monastic practice, of which following rules is only one. The second component of self-discipline for monks is training in restraint of the senses, or Indriya Samvara, which means specifically the restraint of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, contact, and mind. Monks should not look at inappropriate things. For example, if a monk sees a couple fondling each other at the side of the road, he shouldn't stay and watch, but should quickly go somewhere else. Monks should not listen to inappropriate things. For example, there's no need to go listening to the gossip that doesn't concern that monk. Monks should not smell things that are inappropriate, like perhaps cigarette smoke, or taste things that are inappropriate, like liqueur chocolates that taste of brandy. Monks should not touch or have skin contact with things which are inappropriate, whether it be beauty creams for a smooth skin or touching decadent things. Monks should not use their mind to think inappropriate thoughts. In other words, monks should not find pleasure or displeasure from the use of the senses. The third training in self-discipline for monks is practicing purity of livelihood, or Achiva Parisati. Although monks have dropped out from the rat race, they still have to make their living somehow, even if it's not by cultivating fields or being paid as an employee. The pure way to make a living for monks is to go on alms round. All monks know this, but some think that alms round is inconvenient because the supply of food is unpredictable. They therefore try to get a more reliable income by setting themselves up as a fortune teller or as a purveyor of lucky lottery numbers. But this would not be considered a pure livelihood for monks. Lotteries are a form of gambling, and gambling is one of the roads to ruin. This is why if you come across monks who encourage and make a living out of predicting lottery numbers, you shouldn't encourage them, because they're in breach of monastic discipline. Fortune telling by monks is no better than lottery tips, because fortune telling in effect is just a pseudoscience where the gullible see divination at play, whereas in all likelihood there's nothing more than probability. The punters only tend to remember the predictions that come true. To many, these self-fulfilling prophecies are easier to believe in than facing up to the responsibilities implied by the causes and effects of karma. The fourth and last training in self-discipline for monks is to reflect on the 4 requisites that support them, or Pachaya Pachavekana. This is the practice by monks of recollection or reflection on the 4 different sorts of requisites, either before, during, or after use. The 4 requisites comprise clothing, food, shelter, and medicine, and are basic for survival. Monks must consume no more requisites than are required to keep the body going, in the same way as fuel keeps a car mobile. Most people use the requisites of life without distinguishing between need and want, but for monks, the proper practice is to use requisites to train oneself in moderation. So just before we conclude today, there is one more Naga story from the Dhammapada I would like to share with you, because it is an illustration of how difficult it is for monks to keep their self-discipline and the dangers involved. Once upon a time, there was a Naga king called Erakapata, which literally translates as Eraka leaf, because in a previous lifetime during the dispensation of Kassapa Buddha, this particular individual had been a monk for 20,000 years in a forest. As some monks still do, he used to go for his alms round while paddling his own boat. But one day, as he was going along, he accidentally grasped a leaf of an Eraka plant, which is probably a kind of water weed, and it snapped off in his hand. Unfortunately, in the Code of Monastic Conduct, there is a minor rule that prohibits monks from destroying foliage. Although he practiced meditation for 20,000 years in the forest, at the moment of his death, he didn't think about his meditation, but he obsessed instead about the supposed lapse in his self-discipline. And because of his great remorse, instead of being born in a high level of heaven, much to his grief and despair, he was reborn as a huge Naga serpent. The reason he was so sad was because he realized how, having been reborn in animal form, it would be hard for him to continue on his pathway towards enlightenment. Because Nagas have very long lifespans, he bided his time and waited for the appearance of the next Buddha. Since Erakapata had a very beautiful daughter, he asked her to help him track down the Buddha of the new era. To attract the attention of anyone who knew the teachings of the Buddha, she danced and sang a riddle, which only someone with the knowledge of the Buddha would be able to answer. She offered herself in marriage to anyone who would sing a reply to her song. Erakapata hoped thereby to become aware as soon as a Buddha should appear in the world. The riddle constituted 4 questions. Firstly, who is a ruler? Secondly, is one who is morally dysfunctional to be counted as a ruler? Thirdly, what sort of ruler is free of moral defilements? And lastly, what sort of person can be considered a fool? Many unsuccessful suitors came and went, unable to answer the riddle to the satisfaction of Erakapata's daughter, and an interval between 2 Buddhas passed, and still no one was successful. At last, a young Brahmin called Uttara, who was later to become a stream enterer, managed to answer the riddle. He gave the 4 correct answers: that whoever controls the 6 senses is a ruler. Secondly, whomever is overwhelmed by the mist of moral defilements cannot be called a ruler, since rulers must be those free of craving. Thirdly, a ruler free from craving is one who is free from moral defilements. And lastly, the person who hankers after sensual pleasures should be called a fool. Uttara's correct answers were to lead Erakapata to the Buddha, and later Erakapata was able to receive a teaching from the Buddha. However, the Naga was again seized with great sorrow on account of his condition, and would also have attained stream entry had it not been for his animal nature. As a result of the whole tragic story, the Buddha spoke the familiar 182nd verse of the Dhammapada that Kicho manusa patilapho, kichang machana tivitang, kichang sathamma savanang, kicho buddhanang uppato, which translates as, it is hard to gain rebirth in human form. Hard indeed is the life of mortals. It is hard to hear the sublime teachings of the Buddhas. It is hard for the Buddha to arise in the world. In theory, if the monk in the past had focused on his meditation instead of his perceived transgression, he would have attained enlightenment much more easily. This is why a major component of self-discipline, at whatever level we practice, is concerned with keeping our mind bright and clear as a result of our conduct in word and deed, rather than being obsessed with these small details. So in conclusion, what you may have gathered about self-discipline from my session today, whether applied to lay Buddhists or to monastics, is that it involves a lot of things called precepts, which are shalt not abstentions, couched in the terminology of rules of training. They start out as prohibitions from action of word and deed that take advantage of the weaknesses of others, although in more elaborate sets of precepts, the rationale extends to streamlining the mind for meditation, and if you are a monastic, to preserve the reputation of the monastic community, and to preserve the teaching for perpetuity. What you will see, though, especially with the monastic way of practicing self-discipline, is that the rules are a means to an end of internalizing self-discipline as part of one's character, a quality known as noble self-discipline or Arya Sila. Once self-discipline becomes internalized, then it will be realized that even simple acts such as picking up litter in a public area, put in a trash can be considered an act of self-discipline too, because it's a small act of self-sacrifice for the greater good. Also, in order to see what we are really aiming for when we internalize self-discipline, apart from attaining the tenfold path of wholesomeness, I've included a slide of the second of the 10 perfections that shows that self-discipline, practiced correctly, will allow us to overcome any shoddiness still lingering in our character that affects the wider community, while avoiding any behaviors likely to bring us into conflict with others, just like the yak that takes the trouble to extricate its tail from a thorn bush without leaving behind a single strand of hair. Our precepts can therefore be thought of like a mold which transforms worthless clay into luxury tableware. In the same way, the precepts shape our lives to upgrade our character from savagery to humanity. So this session, I have introduced you to blessing number 9 on self-discipline. For my next live session online with you, fingers crossed, which will be a week on Sunday morning, I will move on to the 10th blessing on the topic of skillful communication, which explains how speaking artfully can be a pathway of blessings. For good measure, I'd like to remind viewers you can email your questions about meditation or what you've heard in the lecture to the email address you can see spelled out on the slide. And I'll do my best to answer those questions on my next session. In the meantime, try to stay healthy, avoid recklessness or complacency in the face of the virus, maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, and extend good wishes to others and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, for those of you who are already able to apply your knowledge with mastery, you will be a little bit savvier about how to apply your skills in a way that uplifts your ethicality in life. So for today, this is me, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, signing off for today. So long, folks, and stay safe.